Alright, so picking up where I left off from before on cutting out the tubs, basically today we're just going to be cutting everything else out, and I'll be showing where to cut along the fender supports, where to cut up until the headlight bracket, and then basically explaining the path of where I want to go in terms of direction after this, and the next steps after this, and also why we're doing it and all that. Alright, so like I was saying in terms of first steps and what I'm going to be doing today, basically long story short, all I'm going to be doing is cutting. You can see where I already cut on this side, but basically we're going to continue this a little bit further. We're going to go along that weld line where it's been spot welded on the frame, and then just underneath the fender liner we're going to come up under this, and then you can see a little bit right there where it laps over, and just above that line we're going to cut all the way back. And it's easier to see on this side once you've got the fender off as well, but there's a ridge right here that runs up. It kind of changes directions a few times, but all of this right here is what we want to keep. We want to keep this lip because that's what the harness is sitting on for now. Obviously we will be changing that in the future as well, but for now the harness needs to bolt up there. So beyond that, we're going to do that to both sides. That side I've got a few other things in place. So on this side, the issue that I'm going to have is working around the fuse boxes. There's one support for the fuse box that's already got a threaded, it's a welded nut on the back side of it, and basically it's a bracket that mounts the fuse box to the tub. Obviously we're planning to cut these tubs, so that poses an issue. So I did a few different ideas as to where I could leave metal and cut around. I don't know if I want to curve it or just leave it straight, coming straight off of here, and then obviously down underneath it too. So the first step is going to be to take out all of this wiring, get it all out of the way on both sides. We've got one harness that comes through the firewall there, or not firewall, but tub, and then same thing on this side, and basically just imitate what we do over here on this side. So let's get started. So one thing that you might ask yourself while I'm doing this is why I'm wearing a respirator to be cutting metal. And typically you don't need a respirator to cut metal like this, but this paint is so old that when it burns at the temperature from when you cut it, it's not only the paint but also the putty that they use to seal the gaps. When that burns, it's actually pretty toxic and you don't want to be breathing it in. So just as a safety precaution, I'm going to be wearing a respirator. Alright, so I just quickly went ahead and, as you just saw, I just chopped pretty much all of the top section out until under the headlight, and then now we're going to go back along a line, but I have to draw the line on the outside of the tub first because I can't really get the angle grinder on the inside very well with where the power steering pump is sitting right now. So I'm going to do that really quick, and then we've got one other, we just need to cut 2 slits to be able to get this wiring harness through the metal for when it drops, because as you can see, this is all loose now. So as soon as that's done, then the tub should just drop out. But first I gotta draw that line and cut that. So right under here you can kind of see where I drew the line. Basically this just follows the pinch weld that's on the frame itself. But we're just gonna cut along this line all the way back to where we meet with this cut. So I'm gonna bring this down a little bit and then link it probably right around there. So knock this out really quick. Alright, so with this entire side cut out, that's pretty much the idea. You have what used to be and what is now. And that's a good amount of clearance. Like, that's a whole lot of metal that comes out of there. But because I already filmed the process on this side, I figured it would be best to, instead of showing that again, I would just kind of bang some jams and knock this one out really quick, and then once that's done, then I'll go back over it and kind of clean it up, clean up some edges, smooth it out with the grinding disc as opposed to the cutting disc, and then yeah, probably put down some paint over it. We'll do a little bit of primer, a little bit of white just to match the bay. Nothing too crazy, but just enough so that it doesn't rust. And then piece the car back together and figure out fuse box mounting spots. Alright, so I just took a second to try and figure out what I'm gonna do on this side for the fuse box bracket. I do want to use the original material from the tubs to support the bracket for the fuse box, but I wasn't sure on what way I wanted to go about doing that. I drew a few lines of different ways that I could do it, either curved or just a straight bracket. And I think the way I'm gonna do it is just the straight bracket. I was thinking about this, and honestly I just don't think it would look the best. I think straight is going to be a lot cleaner and the fuse box is going to cover it better, so I don't want to drag attention away from the real life of the party to some bracket holding the fuse box. So from here on out, I think I'm just going to skip over to a time-lapse view and just knock this thing out.
But I ain't no oil tycoon, and if I'm gone to November, won't see my ass till next June. And and it's true. In a broad daytime afternoon, trying to spoil my mood. I'm trying to enjoy my cartoons. Bitch, you ain't have many friends, but you the shit to me. Bankroll, every time you at a party, it's a scene. Bankroll, always had to save you from a sucker thing. Bankroll, tuck it plays, always coming in your dreams. You ain't have many friends, but you the shit to me. Bankroll, every time you at a party, it's a scene. Bankroll, always had to save you from a sucker thing. Bankroll, tuck it plays, always coming in your dreams. You ain't have many friends, but you the shit to me. Bankroll, every time you at a party, it's a scene. Bankroll, always had to save you from a sucker thing. Bankroll, tuck it plays, always coming in your dreams. You ain't have many friends, but you the shit to me. Bankroll, every time you at a party, it's a scene. Bankroll, always had to save you from a sucker thing. Bankroll, tuck it plays, always coming in your dreams. You ain't have many friends.
Alright, so just like that, I think we have concluded the tubs, or at least the cutting of them. I do still need to go back and grind all of the edges, and I figured I'd show you guys where I cut as well, in case if anybody else was wanting to do this on their S chassis. Obviously all of the wires are going to have to, I ended up, the blade got so hot that the piece where that bracket was actually welded to as a part of the tub melted and separated. So I ended up just cutting it, and this is actually plenty strong for the fuse box. In the future I probably will do another bracket and weld it to the bar, just like how everything else is going to be. Like, we're going to have tubs, or tabs rather, coming off of the bar for headlights and radiator and everything really. So it'll definitely fit in the way that we do it no matter what. But where I cut along here is a pinch weld that folds over on the backside here, and I know it's very hard to see because there's not much light under here, but basically there's an edge that comes back, and there you can kind of see it. It's got the pinches, and you're just gonna follow them basically until you get, there's one little section that you gotta kind of freestyle right here, but you just make one clean line up until the pinch weld's here. And I just followed the pinch weld all the way down on both sides, and you can see there's definitely enough room. I do need to take that fender back off and just grind everything down, spray it, clean it obviously before you spray it, but I'm gonna make it pretty and so that you don't get cut on any of these sharp edges like we can see right here. So at the end of the day yesterday, I was having some trouble with that paint can. I'm not really sure why, but it still had a bunch of paint left in it and it just wasn't letting anything out of it. So I ran up to Home Depot, got a new can of spray paint, and covered all of those cuts on the tubs just so that they won't rust out. And then once I did that, the only thing left to do was put everything back where it went. So I went through and I hooked all of the intercooler piping back up. I got the MAF sensor back hooked onto the turbo. I got the fuse box mounted onto that bracket. And then all of the wiring you want to just tuck out of the way so that it's not rubbing on anything. On this side it is actually a little bit close, but I think it should be alright. I am going to be getting some stiffer springs on the front and the back actually, so that should take care of that issue. And then in the future we're going to be doing a bunch more to this car. We've got some big plans for this motor initially until we're able to do a swap. I will be doing a full exhaust on this because it doesn't have one at all right now. And just the rest of what it needs basically to be able to drive and slide reliably. So like the small things, we got breather ports that need to go back on the valve covers, we got to figure out timing. Really beyond that it's just going to be the smaller stuff. Today I was actually able to replace the MAF sensor. It was faulty from the previous owner, so I was able to fix that. It had a bunch of wiring issues throughout the entire loom there, so I traced that back all the way through the harness and it's all sorted. So I'm really stoked with how these tubs turned out. I don't think it was the worst job ever to do in the world if you're looking at doing it yourself on your own S chassis. I think a lot more than anything else, it's just intimidating to think about. And it's like anything with a car, it's just intimidating before you actually get in to do it. And then once you're doing it, it's so easy and it just comes as second nature. But if you want to see all the future stuff that we do to this car, then you can just go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube. I'm also Clutch Kit Kenny on Instagram, and I post stories there all the time of anything that I'm doing to the car, or that car, or the scooter. It's all on there. So if you want to see that first, then hit me up on the gram. And in the meantime, I'll see you guys in the next video.